Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. Today, we have a special guest for our National Poetry Month, Khalil Murrell. Did I say that right, Khalil?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Khalil is
you.
a poet. He grew up in Camden, New Jersey, wedged between a meat factory, Walt Whitman's house, and the county jail. He has an MFA from Sarah Lawrence College and ran programs for the Dodge Poetry Festival and program for many years. He now works in educational leadership and writes poetry and essays on race, racism, and Black masculinity. Khalil currently lives in Newark, where he's improving his Spanish and dreams of South America. That sounds
CTC.
that sounds lovely. So I've had the chance to read your poetry. I love it. And
Oh, great. I'm glad it didn't suck.
no, I really liked it. I liked it. And you incorporate so many Arabic words. So I don't know how much you really know, but today you guys are gonna be able to enjoy this poetry. But first, let's find out a little bit about your background, about what initially sparked your love for poetry.
Well, I might be dating myself now, but when I was young, there was this movie called Love Jones, and with Nia Long and Lorenz Tate. And long story short, these two artists met in a what's the word they call it? A shindig or a speakeasy, and they had this, I don't know, weird, toxic maybe love affair. But one of the scenes, or in two of the scenes, each of them had written a poem that they recited about their experience or their love towards one another. And the poem that Nia Long recited, I actually learned later, was written by Sonia Sanchez, But when I saw that movie, I thought, man, I would love to do something like that. But, despite my stature, I'm about 6'4", but back then I guess I would have been somewhere between 6 feet and 6'2". I had a big body, but I was actually a pretty shy guy. So I thought, how can I do that? But I don't have that personality.
I'm too tough to write poetry.
But, I was always a kid who wanted to put a creative spin on my essays in school. And I just think that just over time translated into, I could do something beyond write creative essays, for my assignments. I could actually do something with, creative writing. So, just over time, I would write things here and there. And then in college, I took one poetry class as like an easy elective. And that turned out to be the most difficult of all my classes I had. Well, the most labor intensive. We had to do so much work for that class, but I loved it. And I've been writing ever since.
Wow. So you got hooked.
Very much so. Very much so.
And who were some of the authors and poets who inspired you over the years? How has that evolved, by the way, from the time that you started poetry to even today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The latter point. Influences are always this interesting thing because a lot of times when I hear people talk about influence, it sounds very almost like formulaic, like, oh, I heard of this person, and then ever since then I've been writing or singing or acting in this specific way. But the truth is, like, poets just kind of pop up here and there while you're writing. You read something and you're like, oh, let me try that. But I would say two kind of pillars in my early writing were Lucille Clifton. If you see my poems visually, I write entirely in lowercase. And that's something that's just endured from discovering Lucille Clifton, who also wrote and really kind of pioneered that kind of celebration of Black vernacular in in poetry during a time where it wasn't so accepted. So
I didn't
her
know that.
writing,
Interesting.
yeah, her writing used very little punctuation. Now, see, I'm a grammar geek, so I'm a little obsessed around punctuation. So my earlier poems didn't have punctuation, but then I would like wake up in the middle of the night and like go to my computer like
Put them all in.
I can't do this.
So
I
the
can't do this.
lowercase is okay, but not the punctuation.
I would say Lucille, then a poet by the name of Sharon Olds, who writes very, or at least at the time, just wrote very kind of bold, provocative, personal narrative poems. And that was a time where I needed a certain kind of courage to write about my life at the time. And then one pivotal book in my life was now I can't remember it, but by Major Jackson, I believe it is Leaving Saturn, either leaving Saturn or returning to Saturn, leaving Saturn, I think. And it was the first time I saw like names like mine, or he grew up in Philly, and I spent a lot of my childhood in Philly as well. And he was writing about neighborhoods that I walked every day. And so that was the first time, like, I feel like my life and my identity came alive in a book in contemporary writing. So I would say those three, but one of my favorite poets today, his name is Joe Weil. He says, he likes to say, I don't have favorite poets, I have favorite poems, meaning anybody can write a poem that is breathtaking, that resonates with you, and that can inspire you. And in that respect, I'm a lover of poems.
So true. That is true. It is about the poem. You could just read, if something touches you, you really don't need to even see the name. I mean, that
Right.
the poem, I have it's Poetry Foundation, sounds like a daily one poem a day.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes it's all it takes. Like I can tell just when something grabs you, and that's it. It's the poem.
Yeah.
So, how does poetry influence culture and human life, in your opinion? And how do you think your poetry in particular is culturally significant?
Um, I think poetry gives you a certain kind of permission, especially in Western culture. We're so bop, 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 so quick paced, so dismissive on to the next experience. I was talking to a friend the other day about how we miss going to concerts. And one of my friends in the group chat said, well, she was calling out another friend. Well, every time we go to the concert, you have your camera up and it's like you're not even present to the experience. So what do you really miss?
Right.
And I feel like poetry gives a certain kind of permission to slow down and just to live in that moment.
Yes.
And if more longer forms like, novels are telling like a very long story over time, I feel like poetry often is telling the story of a moment. And that to me is, it's actually very freeing. It's very freeing. It's a kind of inhale, exhale of, oh my goodness, like I can just be here in this moment, not have to worry about bills, heartbreak. Well, sometimes I'm writing about heartbreak, but all of these other broader things that, once you put the pencil or pen down, that you can go on and worry about. It also is, I like to think about art in general, but particularly literary arts as conversations between people. And so in that respect, I'm conversing, or people have been conversing with me, people from different backgrounds, people who lived in different centuries than I have, people who live in different continents than I have, and we are speaking to one another through our work. And hopefully, my work continues that legacy of, pushing a conversation forward. And by conversation, I don't mean that poems have to have a specific kind of point. Like, they're not essays in that way, but just in the sense of, this thing gave me a thought and I'm exploring it. And I know that you have similar thoughts, or something I mentioned in this poem will remind you of something that you experienced. And in that way, I hope that I am kind of adding to the canon in that way.
Well, I had the chance to read some of the poetry that you had sent. So we have not met in person or
Uh-huh.
something like that. But this was an opportunity for what you just said. There was like, there's an intimacy there from reading something that you are writing on such a deep level, on such a vulnerable level, and your
Sure.
honesty in your poetry is so beautiful. So aside from your ability with the wordsmith, but it's like you're speaking from the heart. And so that conversation, that kind of communication, uh, that was an introduction to who you are on a
Yeah.
much deeper
Yeah.
level than if we were just to be talking right now. And then if I was
Right.
to write it, I would have learned more about you after reading, I think.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
because it goes to such a intimate and deep level and just touches all the human aspects of it. You could be male and female, and you can have such a different background. And I was born in Baghdad, and you were born in the U.S. But your poetry, it doesn't matter. It transcends all of that because when
Right.
you speak from the
Right.
heart, we hear it.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a frequent saying that I'm probably going to butcher at this moment, but a frequent saying in poetry is that we write in the particular to get at the universal. And I'm a black kid, black male from Camden, New Jersey, and certainly not everyone has that experience. But the things that I'm trying to investigate, I think, can connect to people across all ways of life.
And that means the world. That's really what
Yes.
poetry is. Yes. And how has your childhood and background influenced the type of poetry that you write?
It's interesting because people chuckle sometimes when they read my bio and I talk about grew up wedged between a meat factory, the county jail, and Walt Whitman's house. But first, it's very true. Like if I look this way,
that's very interesting. Okay, I'm sure you had a very interesting perspective on life.
Like all three were blocks from my house in three different directions. But really, that's really trying to get at like the way that like environment can shape the way that you show up in the world. I grew up in Camden gets a really bad rap. And a lot of times, the people there, don't get humanized in the way that they should. But, it is a city that just from the physical environment can kind of create a certain kind of harshness that I didn't know it at the time. I know it now as a mature adult that can process and reflect. But at the time, I was trying to write against a certain kind of hardening, a forgetting, a kind of despair that I think can encapsulate many men in particular. And I wanted to always write as if I didn't think anyone else was going to read it. Like I'll worry about someone else reading this later, but at the moment, let me focus on saying the things that, that help me feel alive. And that really is what poetry does for me. It makes me feel alive.
Well, we would love to hear some of that poetry. So if you can read it for us, we'd be so happy to listen.
Sure. So you mentioned early on, in the opening, how you saw some Arabic words in.
Oh yes, and I really did love that.
So I have this really interesting experience where my dad is Muslim, my mom's family is Christian, and then I went to Catholic school. So for a good number of years, I had to go to mass because it was required at least once a month if you go to Catholic school. And then I was going to the masjid or the mosque and Sunday school all at once. So
wow, now you sound even more interesting, Khalil. I didn't know that part, but
Yes.
now I think we have you today representing many communities as a poet.
Yes, but as a kid, I actually did go to Arabic school, so that's why a lot of Arabic words show up in my writing on Saturdays. I can't remember anything now, but except from a few phrases or not. But when I Arabic school, as in to learn the language, not yeah.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
so this poem is called "What My Father Taught Us," and it's what's referred to as a list poem. And I thought, like, let me make a list of all the things I learned from my parents and then make it funky, essentially. What my father taught us. To call Mother Umi, to say Alhamdulillah when someone sneezes, shukran for thank you. To start a day righteously, on the good foot, which is to say, to begin an activity, a chore, stepping out of bed, raking leaves, shaking hands, not your penis after pissing, with the righteous side of your body. To enter a room with your chest already there, like a chariot horsed by black stallions, your face in the bosom of Allah. To search the bodega like frantic roaches, for snacks okayed by kosher or halal. To turn from plates of pork, to never lick envelopes, the glue is pig pus. To reclaim the jaw and throat of your names, Mustafa, Dawood, Jassi, Khaled. To forbid your sisters from understanding the metallic smooth of doorknobs. To wipe your head and face, wash hands to elbows, ankles to feet before touching the Quran. To knock a kid in his face if you must, that a black man has no place in the army. To recite Hail Mary only at school because you have to, but not at home. To excel in all subjects except religion, which you may fail. To refuse communion, and if they ask, tell the priests, my father said I could. This poem is called Backwards, the Story of Distance. Oh, it mentions one word in here, Pathmark, which is just like, I don't know, our Kroger, Harris Teeter, it's just a supermarket. She says, my love so strong, I could count one by one each hair stranded along your back. We were naked, black evening offered us moonlight. I say, I forgot to pick up Nair from Pathmark. The light splashed in soft from the window, dividing the bed. She says, you're so mysterious. Even the patch below your belly button is an unknown forest. I wiggle down, curtain the covers to my chest. I love your gap when you smile, she says, feathering my face with her fingers. I close my mouth, pulling away. We were poor, I say. My mother couldn't afford braces. No, don't fix it, she says. It gives you character. I say, haven't you heard? Americans judge people by their dental work. I think you make it impossible to love you, she says. Why is that? I say, I had a dream in which I'm running from town into the mountains, thirsting distance. I envied the weightlessness of air, the trees barely breathing. She kisses the curve along my back. Yes, you wrestled there with cold in the body of a rock, remember? You felt my shadow keeping you warm, my breath already there, making fire. This poem is called Falling in Love with My Father Again. When I was about 21, 22, I had to get a surgery to remove my thyroid. Actually, 2 operations, I believe. And this poem kind of explores that. Falling in love with my father again. When metal and finger broke the ground of my flesh, I entered the smoke and darkness. Anesthesia is like the fifth martini on an empty stomach. I grew a new mouth along my neckline, which whispered expletives to death in my sleep. Perhaps forgiveness was there. I was a mute, a mummy wrapped in a dream. No, an octopus. I awoke with a larger center, hungry. 6 extra arms, fiending for everything. Glucose, liquid Motrin, a blue button summoning a cute nurse, her shining cleavage. My father loomed above me like a tease, a temptation, a half-open fist full of caramel. His shadow darkened the walls like an angel. I could not speak or swallow, gooey-eyed over memory. I knew nothing of childhood's resentment, its cancer-like lyric. The surgeon's song, Mendelssohn, still twirling in my mouth. My lymph nodes throbbed a burning melody. My body a singing city of pain. Who else could hold me but my father? Who else could turn the swelling into a jukebox, soft brush the sweat off my forehead, and hand me a river?
Thank you so much. That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed and the one with the Arabic words, that's actually the one that had caught my attention. And then that's what transports you really, and you feel like this could be written by somebody from the Arab world,
Yeah.
just as easily. And when you don't know who the poet is in the background, you're just you're just sucked into the poem and just enjoy the process.
Absolutely.
Yes. So Khalil, what would you say has been the biggest challenge in your writing career? And obviously, you've already shared the rewarding part of it, but what has been the challenging part, would you say?
Discipline. No, well, for me, yes. Like, I'm not disciplined at anything, even things that I love. But I love, there's a poet named Lee Young Lee, and he has this great metaphor about the Christian concept of the anointing, and how you pray every day, you do the work of scriptures every day, out of obedience, out of a relationship, and then every once in a while, God kind of comes down and graces his presence. And in that moment, you have the anointing to do something spectacular. And I think discipline, he likened that to the writing process, in the sense that you write every day, or whatever your writing process is. And most days you come up with nothing. It's not interesting. It's not beautiful. Or you might just have one line. And then every now and then, God kind of comes down and just decides that, like, in this session, I really want to do something magical. Or you're going back in your process, and you're seeing something. I mean, you're going back into old writing scraps, and you see something that really is saying, oh, wow, most of this is trash, but this one line here, I can really do something with it. So I would say discipline, but speaking more broadly, just the time really is a resource. And when you work and have kids or a life, and all of those things, especially now it's getting warmer. Outside of the pandemic, now you want to be outside. You don't want to be inside writing.
After all that's right.
Yeah. So there's that. But it's just life, just the daily cares of life, the responsibilities, and then sometimes writer's block.
Yeah. Actually, I like the word that you chose about discipline, because in talking to a lot of writers over the years and associating, and myself being a writer, I think this is the one area that people, especially the creative people that are passionate about their writing, don't give enough attention to. They don't think that you need discipline. It's just, it's all fun, and you just sit there, almost like painting. but it does require discipline. And I think that's a very important part. Um, I wanted to ask you how, or do you combine your work and educational leadership with your creative talent?
I do, in the sense that one, I'm always looking for opportunities to invite creativity in the space.
Mhm.
I've also, run a lot of like youth development and arts programs. I really believe that, art is a huge way to allow kids to, develop socially and emotionally. I mean, I know that from the impact of art in my own life. But in terms of working with adults and working in leadership, sure, like meetings are, sometimes meetings are just not the most interesting things. And so I really try to find ways to bring in both in terms of like the process of how we conduct the meeting, try to invite like creativity into the meetings themselves, and sometimes in content to like break up the monotony of a meeting. I will, bring in something that will fascinate people and just break up the kind of the PowerPointness of of a gathering.
Yeah, and actually it helps people focus when people like yourself do that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what would you advise younger writers who feel underrepresented and marginalized?
Um, well, the first thing is you should practice art because you love it. Writing is a very solitary art. Now, it becomes public when you do things like this, when you have readings, and semi-public when you share it with maybe an individual friend. You can swap poems and give each other feedback. But a lot of it is very solitary. At the same time, it gives you a sense of voice, and so there's something democratic about that. Rich, poor, Black, white, Hispanic, Arab. At the end of the day, there's a blank sheet of paper in front of all of us, and either you're going to write or you're not going to write. And in that way, it kind of puts everyone at an even playing field. So that's one piece. Two is don't neglect reading. I know in this age we are very like, listen to what I've got to say. But there is a history of people who have been marginalized, isolated, faced violence, their heart has been broken. Any problem you can name, I'm pretty sure at this point in the world of human history, someone has written about it. So in that sense, if you're reading poetry, you will then like enter this community of people throughout the history of humankind who have faced similar challenges as you, and you feel less lonely over time. And the third thing is find a community of other writers. Kids today have the benefit of something we didn't. I grew up under the very beginning of the tech age, but kids have access to things that older generation did not. Now you can, if you feel, if you're in a school and you're the only one of your kind, now you have the internet to access people all across your country, your state, that share your culture, share, whatever challenge that you feel that you're having. And specifically in the area of art, you can share poems online, read poems online, enter chat groups about art. So there are a lot of resources for people to feel less lonely now.
That's true. And with only a couple of minutes left, what I'd love to do is to hear a little bit more of your poetry. If you could do that for us, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
This poem is called Waterfront Perspectives. Shauna and I exchange puppy love grins, gaze into the cool sea of each other's eyes at a chic restaurant I cannot afford, but the wind is thoughtfully calm and gentle against our skin, like the hands of an innocent child. and the candle's flickering light sways ever so between us, as if an arms raised crowd rocking back and forth at a concert, drunk on love and music. And I forget, even if for a moment, the nuisance of banks and bills. Shauna chews her steak with the elegance of a dove, pausing to swallow, then smiles, patting her lips wet with gloss, blinking Morse code across the table, which says, I could have 10 of your babies, just the way her mother taught her to behave for a man. Whereas I stare at the small green mint leaf on my plate, finished, hungry still, drifting off sweetly to my favorite hole in the wall in West Philly, where Mrs. Dot greets me with a hug and kiss, a smile that touches my skin, and a plate that considers a man's appetite. It's all about the atmosphere, Shauna says, in her soft fairy tale voice. And I agree the way I've been taught to agree. The way a young son, bored and nodding, leans against the window and agrees with his father, who spills light, mindless chatter along the road trip from New York to DC. And Shauna and I do this together, riding the roaring wave of this beautiful night, pushing us to different destinations. Her to a luxurious life she will one day have with another man, a rich man, and me to the Africans who parked our car and the Mexicans now clearing our table at this overpriced restaurant on the waterfront with its tan marbled bathroom floors, flickering candlelight. I wonder if this moment is a metaphor in the glass half full, half empty between us. Is bliss the budding seed of optimism or oblivion? Are we more than cardboard cutouts of fulfilled expectations? Or am I the sick patient crushing any chance at happiness, even as the poised seagulls fly overhead like noiseless aircraft? I will read one, maybe two more poems.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
I said, okay.
Okay. This poem is called Dear Expectation. Dear Expectation, I hate you. I hate your summer skin, wet and gleaming like sliced pineapple. I hate your manifest destiny, your butterfly heart. You're the worst blind date I've had in years. I talk bad about you to my friends. They hate you too. Your breath stinks and you're a bad lay. I should have ignored Jesus and boned your best friend. I key your car, crap on your lawn. Why do I love you so? Why does each dawn bring me back to you open-armed and stupid? You're like the mother of God. I saw your face in the morning oatmeal. Why does the wind speak only your name? I hate your Colgate smile, your sparkling freckles, the way your eyes glow in the darkest hour. When I come home and my face is an old stone dragged along the carpet, you're a Sunday morning hymn when all I want is a blues song. When my thoughts are bad, you're a quick kick to the crotch. I should trade you in for a girl who understands me, who can help me cope, like Amber Doubt. I should have left you at church. I'm going to the bar from now on. Why does the afternoon light slanting through remind me of your orange shimmer, your golden face? You're a tight red dress with no panties on, a tease. Sometimes you say no at the end of the night. I gave up friends, bad habits for you. I melt under your matchstick touch, and all you do is leave me, looking out the foggy window of my future. Do you see it? Like a golden coin spinning off to its glittery no place. And my final poem is called Blindness. Blindness. My friends say all of my poems, even when they're not love poems, are love poems. So I don't know what to do with that. Blindness. What if, instead of seeing, we felt the color of things? As in, the burgundy socks you wore leaving felt eternal. As in, the oppressive purple of day like an anchor pulling on skin. The night's growling moon jerked back on its leash. Early, I learned the eyes fail us, fall easy into trickery, to longing of things we always wanted. Blinking our lashes, we float behind shadows into yearning. Tonight, two happy dogs hump in your neighbor's yard. They slide across each other like glaciers under drizzling light. I dig up rocks in the mud. Call me dirty desire. Each wet space a home for a different dream. I call out for the gold of your body. I live in the white space left after your breathing. I discover blindness isn't so bad, that thirst lies somewhere between memory and mud. Under a bed of dirt, I write, my name is burning. My mouth, a room full of violet. Thank you.
Khalil, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your really touching poetry. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for watching and listening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.